Well, greetings. This is David Gauci, and Dave Nagel and I welcome you to the fifth talk in the Business and Energy series of Forum 2100 for the year 2021. Today, we are very fortunate to have a return guest, Anna Demeo, who is going to be talking about Savant Power. About 3.5 years ago, I guess, Anna was actually presenting at Forum 2100 when she was leading the R&D activities of RacePoint Energy, which was a niche player, I suppose, at that time in smart microgrids. Well, she's followed quite a journey ever since then, as she is now the president of Savant Power, a much more significant player in the distributed energy space. And she'll tell us a little bit about that. So Anna, thank you very much for joining us again. Welcome back to Forum 2100. We're thrilled to hear the story about your journey from RacePoint Energy to Savant Power. And now, as you are leading this new exciting enterprise into this rapidly evolving space, we turn the floor over to you.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Dave. Nice to be here and nice to come back to Forum 2100. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone on the call. Always happy to talk about energy and about Savant Power. I thought I'd kick off with a short intro video just about Savant Power, and then we'll back out and talk about the company and the journey we've been on since last I was here, and really the future of the space we're in. So I'm going to share my screen. So the power of a marketing company. That's one of the real benefits of the journey we've been on. Great. So I'm going to share my screen now. All right. Well, I wanted to start off by really talking a little bit about the merging of these three distinct companies that we have. So Savant Power is part of the wider Savant Inc., which is made up of Savant, which was a Savant Pro company, GE Lighting, a Savant company, and Savant Power. And I think it's an interesting culmination of skills, of focus, and of cultures that bring together both smart home and smart power to make this unique company that's well suited to tackle many of the challenges that we face today in the energy space, and especially with the utility grid itself. There are, as you all know, probably there's a number of stresses and events that have come together in recent years that really make finding solutions for energy really incumbent upon us getting smarter about how we manage our demand for it. We're on this precipice of transforming how we produce and consume power as we grow into a society that's becoming increasingly energy literate and increasingly engaged and excited about this space. Whether it's because of solar panels or storage or electric vehicles, or even just smart devices in general. And the great news here is that we're at this place and time where the solutions that bring together smart home and smart power are not only good for consumers, which is great, but it's also good for the utility grid and good for the environment as well. So I think it's an interesting story, and hopefully you do too. And so a little bit of the timeline. So Savant started back in 2005, and it set out to create really the best smart home experience there was, right? And so over the last 15 or 16 years, Savant really has become the leader in smart homes in this luxury space. And let's face it, 10, 15, even 5 years ago, that's who was buying automation from the home. And now we all think and talk about smart home, but really it got its start, like many technologies do, in this luxury space. And at its heart, Savant is a software company. And over the last decade and a half, it has profiled literally thousands, I think it's 10,000 devices we're up to, of different devices to manage things in the home, from security to music and entertainment, lighting, climate, you name it. It has built a software platform and a secure cloud platform to do this in the luxury space and the light commercial space. And then going back to our timeline, so in 2015, I collaborated with the owner of Savant to start RacePoint Energy, now known as Savant Power. And our tagline's always been rethinking the grid, which is really what we set out to do, right? The premise of the company was based on my academic research, which I talked about a bit last time I was here at the forum, which really focused on community scale energy efforts that depended on monitoring and management of demand in conjunction with renewable energy and with storage. So when we started the company, we envisioned creating this flexible load management and these microgrids for resilient communities and for virtual power plant applications. However, being a sister company to Savant, it afforded us that same ability to prove out our technology with the Savant consumer base, which really had the disposable income to be the early adopters of this technology. Then in 2020, so just 2 summers ago, really a year and a half ago or so, Savant acquired, wait for it, GE Lighting from GE, which really opened Savant and RacePoint to a much bigger audience, right? This is GE Lighting. This is Tom Edison's own company with over 100 years of history, an iconic brand, an amazing retail reach, and this really strong operations capabilities. And this made it possible for us to reach a much wider consumer base that were products that were more affordable for the average consumer. So that's brought our ability to bring all of this smart technology and smart power from a professional space of professional installs to more of a do-it-yourself space, right? With the combination of these 3 companies. And then just last month, RacePoint was acquired by Savant and we changed our name to Savant Power. So now you have Savant Incorporated, and it's the culmination of these 3 divisions. So you have the Savant Pro, GE Lighting, a Savant company, and Savant Power. And together we've set out to bring smart home and smart power to all homes and businesses, while at the same time still focusing on merging the community piece with the utility piece as we think about really changing and rethinking the grid. And this has been quite a journey over the past few years, but especially the last year and a half, of merging these different size companies, different cultures. And I'm happy to talk about that at the end or answer questions if there are any. But for now, what I'd like to do is get into Savant Power in particular. Now that you've seen the video, you have a sense of what we do, but I'd like to talk about it a little bit more and get into it. And a great place to start talking about what we do is really with the grid and what's going on with the grid. So currently, we're in the process of this paradigm shift with the grid, right? We have aging infrastructure, increased weather volatility, increased power outages. We have an explosion of EV demand and renewable energy and a changing regulatory landscape. And it's really causing utilities to rethink their business models in a significant way. And the motivators for those, for the change, we always talk about as the 3 E's. Now, what's interesting is that the 3 E's of these motivators, energy resiliency, economics, and the environment, are the same 3 motivators that we see our clients, the consumers, that are driving their decisions as well. So much like the local food movement, people are becoming more aware of their energy choices. They're becoming more and more energy literate, and they really want to be active participants in their energy future. So when you think about these 3, taking them both from the utility perspective and the consumer perspective, so you have energy resiliency, that's keeping the lights on. We all want that, right? So the utilities have to keep the lights on, and we certainly want them to, especially in a COVID world where so many of us are working from home. It's critically important to have a stronger, more resilient grid. And then in the economics, we have utilities being faced with the challenges of dealing with aging infrastructure and a whole new set of inputs into their grid with electric vehicles and solar and wind, while at the same time needing to make money, right? Needing to turn a profit. And then for the consumers are seeing, they've seen a steep decrease in the cost of solar, now followed by storage. And they're realizing that they have choices to be able to be stronger participants, to go from consumers to prosumers in sort of this new world order. And then, of course, there's the environment. So utilities are faced with environmental regulations and requirements, and homeowners either are driven by environmental stewardship, either as a first or more often what we're seeing as a second tier to resiliency or economics. So these come together, and that environmental piece really has even a bigger impact when you zoom out and look globally. So we have a climate problem, and the climate problem at its heart is an energy problem. And there should be no dispute about that. Right? 75% of all greenhouse gases comes from the burning of fossil fuels. So when you break that down for the US, 25% of those comes from our electricity sector. And that overlaps with the third that comes from residential and commercial. And then you have another third from transportation. So when you look at this problem and we think about how do we even begin to stay within the 1.5 degrees C temperature rise limit that was agreed upon in the COP21 hearings? How do we get there? And so for North America, the solution is starting to shape up something like this. We have to electrify homes and buildings. We have to electrify the transportation sector. And then we have to decarbonize the grid, right? And that can get us, not all the way there, but that would get us quite a ways. So let's break that down. So when you think about electrifying homes and buildings, that goes hand in hand with smart, right? So we're seeing so many of our customers moving to all electric homes, either by choice or by state or municipal policies. And often that move to all electric, which includes the move to smart appliances, heat pumps, and it seems to also go along with storage and battery as well. Then you look at the transportation sector, and so there's an incredibly steep increase in the adoption of electric vehicles right now. And I'm often asked, well, aren't you concerned if we have too much of an adoption, it's going to break the grid? And I guess if the grid didn't change, that might be true. But I see electric vehicles as being such an asset to the grid going forward, first through beneficial electrification, where we can use demand response to manage that demand against things like solar and wind production. And then going forward into the future, things like vehicle to grid. And then last but not least is decarbonizing the electricity sector. The fastest growing sector of all new generation is in renewables. And so as we have more solar and wind that is intermittent, that is not dispatchable like the traditional coal plants, we have to be able to manage demand to match that. And so we have big problems, they need big solutions. And I'm not ever saying that technology is going to be the only solution, but there are technologies out there that we can port into this space and make a huge difference. And that's going to lead us into Savant Power Solutions. So when you look at Savant Power, I break our products into these three categories. So you have our InCharge Smart Electrical Panel that allows you to monitor and manage demand in real time. And that's a key component in our microgrids, scalable from small homes right up through communities. And both of these products play a role in our utility grid services platform, which is really a DERMS platform, a distributed energy resources management platform. Now, the foundation of all of these products is the software platform that's been around for 15 or 16 years from Savant that allows us to manage all of this, and the user experience and the tools that bring this to life for the consumer and for the electrician and for the utility. So let's break this down one at a time here. Okay, the InCharge panel. So we made a deliberate decision at the beginning not to make a proprietary panel, but rather to make a companion to a breaker. So you see on the bottom left, there is our companion module, and it plugs into any standard load center. So it's not a breaker itself, it's a companion to a breaker. And it works in all the major panels, Eaton, Schneider, Siemens, GE, which is now ABB. And it plugs in and it offers revenue grade energy monitoring and real-time control. And it can work in residential, commercial, single phase, three phase. The whole idea of it was designed to be very easy installation. In fact, a press release just went out with Schneider Electric, who's using this technology in their smart load centers currently. And the idea is that when you have backup generator or backup battery, often it's not sized to be able to cover the whole home or the whole business. And so you're often relegated to a hardwired critical load panel. But what the InCharge panel does is offer you access to every load in the home and building through what we call our energy scenes. So you can choose which loads you need on at any given time. And so this provides not only extended benefit of a generator or a battery optimizing solar, but it also can leverage time of use pricing for utility, offer energy efficiency at the home. And we have a load health and notifications feature that starts to give you much more information about your home or business and how it's performing for you in terms of electricity. And now think if you have an all electric home or building, that has even more value to it. In addition to being able to control these standard loads through our InCharge panel, we also can control a number of smart devices. I said earlier that Savant had profiled 10,000 devices for its smart home platform. And mostly these start off in things like entertainment and lighting and shades. What we've done at Savant Power is we've added to that library with things like hot water heaters and EV car chargers and thermostats, those typical energy loads. So now you can control loads at both the standard device as well as the smart device. And then, like I said, we've spent a lot of time adapting the user interface and the tools from Savant into Savant Power. So we also have a couple of electricians on staff that have helped us develop very intuitive and easy to use tools for electricians to be able to install these companions, to be able to set up generators or batteries and create these essential loads for scenes, as well as put a lot of time into the energy management platform itself. So allowing users to look at their loads in real time, as well as historically, as well as up against solar and battery performances. It can allow users to choose essential loads, as well as give them those notifications about load health and improvements they can make to their system. So there's a lot behind this. We wanted to make it intuitive and easy to use for someone to look at a glance, but also deep enough for people to be able to go in and really do some property management as well to optimize the system. Okay, so as I said before, that InCharge panel becomes a key component in our microgrids as well, whether it's for a home, a business, or a whole community. So on the right, you see that automated demand, which is our InCharge panel that can monitor and control at the breaker level or at the device level of the devices you see below it. And then on the left, you see that we can take inputs from all of the power sources. So the grid itself, solar or wind, battery, generator, cogen, and the like. And then what our software platform does, it does what it's been doing all along in the smart home. And now we've ported that over. So it can plan, act, and then track and react. So we have a machine learning that really optimizes the system to manage what your sources are with what your sinks are. So when you look at it from a home view like this, is that when the grid is up, we can manage different loads in the home or building to optimize things like time of use pricing. Same is true for storage. And then when the grid goes out and we switch over to our backup source, we can start to shed loads to extend the hours of grid autonomy for that particular source. And this can be done for a home. Like I said, we started the luxury home, but now we're moving to any home, and then as well as expanding to light commercial, but also to communities for virtual power plant applications. We're working with both builders and utilities. So on the builder front, wanting to build resilient communities, we're working with several in Texas right now that want to build in resiliency into these planned communities, and then they can form a partnership with the utility to offer a value add to them, to both make the grid more resilient and make the economics work out for the community as well. And finally, I want to conclude on with our grid services platform. So what we've done is we've taken all this technology I just went through with you, and we've applied it, ported it over to the utility space. And I say this a lot when I work with different utilities, is we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just porting proven technology and making it applicable to what the grid needs today. And so you can take our ability to manage demand at the breaker level, as well as the smart device level, as well as our microgrids and storage capabilities, and manage that across communities and across regions. We have a scalable, secure cloud that allows us for data mining, and we can set it up to respond to price signals. So either it can be homeowner driven or it can be utility driven. So I have one last short video for you here that shows this. So the idea here is that in a demand response program for a utility, say they have 3 loads per home. So if you look at this region, you have a number of homes, and let's say each one has a hot water heater, an HVAC, and a car charger. And what happens is we can aggregate across a region, a neighborhood, a street, and we can manage that demand, turning it on and off either in real time or pre-scheduled, to allow the utility to manage this just like it would turn on a new generation plant. Like I said, it can do it by region or by neighborhood or even down to the street level to be able to really fine tune the grid for them. If Texas had this, parts of Texas had this back in February, it really would have gone a long way to be able to curtail some of the consequences of that event. So we're super excited about porting all of what we've done in the consumer space and the luxury space to the wider consumer space and to the utility space as well. So that's the Savant Power story, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Well, Anna, thanks very much. Fascinating. And what a remarkable transformation of the company, I would say, moving rapidly. Yes, we'll take questions from anyone, but let me ask you one just to sort of clarify and get things going. And this goes to product definition, I suppose. What you concluded with looks pretty darn interesting. And if we think about the future of the grid, for heaven's sakes, would a Savant Power and perhaps other entrants like Savant Power, in deploying what they have, create clusters, essentially, microgrids that could be interconnected, thus taking really in the aggregate a lot of pressure, a lot of load off of the grid. so that the grid is transformed no longer in doing what it's doing right now, but in really just being responsible for delivering, say, very low base loads?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's probably the question of our day. Is we all know we're here at this, at least in North America, in the centralized grid, and we can see that we're going to this distributed system. You know, one way or the other, I think we're going to get there. The question is, how far is it going to go, right? How decentralized? What's the role of the utilities? I'm always a big proponent of success for everyone, right? So creating business models that really work for the regulated industry, the regulated utility sector, that support the deregulated part of our utility, and then support the consumer. And so the model that you lay out, David, is certainly one potential outcome where we're really just at base load and everything else is done distributed. But I think a step long before we get there is part of it, I would say, is culturally for consumers, is getting comfortable with this idea of excuse me, load being controlled. Load control is not a new idea, right? I mean, we've been doing this on the industrial level for a long time. Other parts of the world have been doing it, like Australia and New Zealand have been doing it at the residential space. So at least, you know, being North American centric for a second, having consumers understand that there is a place for the utility in this demand management is going to be really key to see how far this can go.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Here's a question from Jan Dash. To what extent would smart grid technology be applicable to the suggested HVDC national network that would be connected to the existing AC grid?
Let me make sure I understand the question. So how much could we use smart grid, what we're talking about, to the high voltage distributed network as well? So I know I have several colleagues working around, so there's a whole bunch of smart that we didn't talk about today, right? The smart that we're talking about at Savant Power is really focused on that residential space. That's where we have the channel development, the knowledge base, and it's where I think we can add the most value in what our company can do. But there's no doubt that when we talk about a smarter grid, we have to talk about all aspects of it, right? There's parts of the transmission line, the high voltage piece of it as well is key. The communications link between where things like high-speed fiber intersects with our grid, all of those are going to play a role as in transforming into a smarter, more robust, more resilient grid. But I would say for Savant Power, we're really focused on that residential piece.
Okay. Well, then picking up on your market targets, I guess, you started with the luxury home market, it sounds like, and then you've begun to migrate. This sounds very much like what GE did or Edison Electric did at the beginning when they started with JP Morgan, people like that. And then I guess it was Samuel Insull began to commoditize electricity. So you're moving to a much bigger market. But in the process, if you're thinking about residential, there are different kinds of residences. So if you go to New York City, a lot of people live in high-rise apartment buildings. If you go to, I don't know, Omaha, Nebraska, much more, probably a greater incidence of single-family homes. The retrofitting issue here, is there something we should be aware of, the challenges of moving to one versus the other?
Yeah, those are two extremes, aren't they? So it's funny. So New York, there's so many pros and cons. Let me see if I can break this down. So in the rural areas or the centric home spaces, what's easier there is being able to permit and install microgrids seems to be a lower bar in terms of regulation and whatnot. But often they're less apt to be in as much need for the technology. So then you take over to New York City, which has a lot of multi-dwelling units, apartment buildings, and whatnot. And the energy management platform, we have the ability to look deep into a system like that. allows for property managers to be much more efficient in their energy. And there's a huge push across this space to do just that in multi-dwelling units. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit for us in places like New York City. There's sort of more bang for your buck. There's just more people. The challenge there is that permitting piece when you come to microgrids. So New York is, that saying's never been truer. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, because it is the gold standard for getting through all of the regulations around UL 9540, 9540A for including battery technology. So what I would say, if you're looking at the landscape in New York, not that we're not moving microgrids there, because we actually have some efforts in microgrids there now, but it's really that energy management system and platform for multi-dwelling units that is the easier lift. And in the single family residential, the microgrids tend to be an easier lift.
Okay, thank you. Here's a question from Ulrich Zieler, who's sitting outside of Stuttgart, Germany. Your focus has, it appears to be North America. I know you're sitting in Canada, but it seems largely US. But the focus is currently on USA and the 115 volt now, or also the 240, 230 volt, 400 volt internationally. Are you moving internationally?
Absolutely. So the company is based in the US. So we have our primary headquarters is in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, with GE Lighting focused in Ohio. And then we have offices in California and Portland and here in Canada. But there we see a big demand for our product, that InCharge panel you saw overseas. And so we already have in beta, or in prototype, I should say, but it's been through testing, our European version, DIN rail version of our InCharge panel. So absolutely.
Well, would you expect actually a place like Germany to be more receptive, perhaps, than trying to tap the US market, considering the Energiewende that's unfolding and has been unfolding predates a lot of what's been going on in the US?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know enough about the German market per se, probably to answer that well enough. But what I can say is that my educated guess, or maybe semi-educated guess, is that in the utility space, I think that the utilities in Europe will be maybe an easier lift in some ways. I wonder, on a consumer basis, really our first target for this is for either new construction or people who are willing to do retrofits for existing battery or generator installations. And I'm not sure the market enough in Germany. Certainly, we have a footprint with GE Lighting and with Savant in Europe and in other parts of the world as well. So we're driving there. I think time will tell the adoption rate. But if you have another one, Leslie, if you look to the future, if you look at us from 10 years from now, what I would say is that most homes will have smart electrical panels, right? That as we change things, we have to get to a place where we have some intelligence built into the electrical panel.
Okay. Here's a question from Ramiro Baldion. Your thoughts on how would the US grid change if we move towards renewable resources generally? Geographically, wind and solar energy are found in the central US.
I'm sorry, Dave, repeat that question.
Okay. Your thoughts on how would the US grid change if we move towards renewable resources generally? Yeah. Geographically, wind and solar energy are found especially in the central US, but are not uniformly distributed. I think
right, the idea of distribution. And I think we are moving that way. I think that's very much, if you look at utility scale, wind and solar taking up the biggest share of new generation, and it is in those central regions, right? And that's a challenge, right? I mean, we're faced with, we all agree that the old grid isn't going to take us into the next 100 years, right? And so we all agree that we have to do something, and we have to face for every country, every region, the reality of our resources as well as our culture. And so right now we do have these centralized pockets or resources for solar and wind, and we have to create a distribution grid that meets that. And one of the challenges is that it's really easy or nice to talk about a distributed grid, but the reality is that we have some better places for solar and wind resources. And how do we take that and get it to the demand centers in our country? And there is going to be some amount of infrastructure to work with that. But I think that's really where storage is going to have to play a bigger role, whether it's storage deployed like the stuff you've seen me talk about today on a larger scale, or through our electric vehicle fleet. I mean, if I could wave a magic wand, I would really want to pair the EV and vehicle to grid with what's going with the explosion of solar and wind.
Okay. So let me sort of build on this a little bit, to go back to the US for a second. Although I should also acknowledge that Germany is just having a change of government. So there may be some surprises coming up there as well. But what government policies, if any, are required for Savant to pursue its strategies? So we would acknowledge that there's a polarized political environment in the United States. How do you manage that? Are there issues that you have to attend to?
Whew, there's a lot to that question. Let's see. Let me give you some specifics. So yes, there's a whole maze of regulations we have to deal with. Let's focus for ease of answer on the residential space. When we started with our original microgrids in the luxury space, even a few years ago, people didn't really local municipalities, decision makers for permitting didn't really know what we were delivering, right? And there were certain rules, but they were kind of fuzzy. And then over the past 2 years, there's really been a shift to new policies around UL, so UL 9540, 9540A, that govern microgrids and storage and deployment of those at the residential space. And can be a bit of a minefield to navigate this, because it can take, as a business, it can take our company a couple of years to not only develop a product, but then to go through all of the compliance. And you don't want to have a business plan where you end up finally getting to the finish line and the rules change, right? That's a challenge for any business in this space right now, whether they're in solar or wind or storage or any of this space, that you're going to do all the development and the rules are going to change. And especially in the US, where it's such a pendulum swing when rules change, that it's a challenging thing to navigate. And so we just finished redesigning our product to be flexible enough to anticipate what might be coming down the pike over the next half decade or so.
So we're getting out of time, and I just want to get two last questions into this discussion. First is, how did the pandemic influence you guys? I mean, was it disruptive to the point where it slowed things down, or did it actually accelerate things, or did it have no effect?
Well, it didn't have no effect, I'll tell you that. Really interesting. So from a team perspective, employees, everybody went home, and a lot of the software team is used to working remotely. But remember, we're building power systems, and everybody's home. And so the challenge of building labs in people's homes, testing equipment, and making sure everybody's safe and informed, and it was just so exciting and heartwarming to see people just sort of embrace this and figure it out, right? And to see the team, like, as we all went to our separate homes, sort of come together to make this happen. And we developed so much of what we've done through this pandemic. So that was great. From a business side, there is actually across all of Savant Inc., so Savant Home, GE Lighting, and Savant Power, as people have moved their homes and made their homes also their offices, there's been a huge uptick in business for us as people invest in their home, invest in more smart in their home. And certainly that resiliency piece, whether that's imagined or real, but this pandemic has made people even more sort of concerned about that resiliency piece. And that's been really a a boost to the businesses across Savant Inc.
Okay, so here's a loaded question that we probably talk on for a long time, but I just have to tap your brain.
Okay.
Can you share any reflections on your career journey thus far? I mean, it's been remarkable what you've done and what you've been through and experienced. What advice and lessons learned might you share with others? Anything?
Let's see. So I feel very fortunate to have been able to go weave back and forth between industry and education. So teaching at the university, working with students, really feeling like I'm making a difference in educating the next generation, not just about energy, but about how to look at issues of energy and climate from an interdisciplinary standpoint or multidisciplinary, where you're looking not just at technology, but economics and policy and social impacts. And that has its benefits. But then being able to come into the business world and see that knowledge and that experience be bringing solutions to homes and educating people who may not believe climate change is real, but are adopting solutions because they make their lives better or they make economic sense. And it's a different set of rewards and a different set of challenges. I think my biggest challenge is that's a loaded statement. My biggest challenge is finding sort of a path that is sustainable. And I think that what I would say, I'll conclude on what you say, what would your advice be? And I think for me, it is doing something you're passionate about, something you really believe in that you can make a difference in, and trying to stay focused enough, because there's so much to be done, that creating that balance for your career and your family and your life, and matching that with making your values into what you do for work, I think is a great way to do it. So
great. Anna, thanks so much. Such a joy to have you back.
Thanks for
We'll have
having
to
me.
have you back in
Always
another
fun.
3.5 years.
We'll see where I am then, huh?
Maybe
you.
we could even collaborate with you on a book or something like that.
What a great idea.
What a great idea. Okay. Thank you, Anna.
All right,
So for everyone, this session has been recorded. We'll have it posted and sent around to the whole group within the next day or so. Please join us on the 7th of December at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, when we will have a presentation on Tilt Global Decisions. And you'll finally be able to see the man behind the curtain, Dave Nagel, who is actually going to speak. And we'll tell you all about this. So please join us. It's actually our own little venture into the world of decision-making laboratories for energy. So see you then. All the best. Bye for now.